Good morning, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak with you today about community empowerment-centered policing reform for automated enforcement. Okay, my name is Carlton T. Mayers II, Esquire, and through my consulting company, Mayor Strategic Solutions LLC, which I am the CEO and founder of, I work with communities across the country on solving public safety challenges with public safety solutions that they establish on their own and that are centered on community empowerment. And this is based on an approach that I developed called the Community Empowerment Centered Approach, and its vehicle called the CAP method, C for Community Empowerment, A for Accountability, T for Transparency. This is a methodology that I developed with my over 15 years of experience doing this work across the country, working for NAACP National for about 3 years, doing that work across the country, working for Legal Defense Fund for about 3 years, doing that work around the country and with President Obama's administration, and also working at Southern Poverty Law Center in Florida, and doing that work around the state of Florida. And so taking all of that knowledge of working with all of these different communities of race, of socioeconomic status, even of national origin, and all of them are having issues with law enforcement. Now the issues look different, but they're issues. So it doesn't come down to, okay, here's a solution with body-worn cameras. Here's a solution with de-escalation training. Here's a solution with crisis intervention training. The what? That's not where I come in. Like the what's are out there, there's a lot of people who have done that research. Where I come in is helping communities figure out how do we make the what work for us? Because what's working in Detroit may not work in Kalamazoo. What's working in Grand Rapids may not work in Kalamazoo because there's different demographics, different histories, and different cultures. And all of that has to align with the solutions in order for those solutions to be sustainable over time. In other words, we don't want Band-Aids for something that needs stitches. We want stitches for something that needs stitches. So that's where I come in. It's not about, let's see what Los Angeles did and copy and paste it and do it in Kalamazoo. It's about, okay, what's already in your backyard, resources that you have that maybe you're not utilizing, maybe you're not knowledgeable of. How can we have that better coordinate? And then where you don't have resources, where are there other places, other cities, other localities that are doing it well? And how are they doing it? What can we learn from them? And then bring that into what you're doing, but custom tailor it to your community, okay? So that's what I do with Community Empowerment Centered Approach. I'm gonna go into that with more detail a bit later when we talk about solutions, as we talk about automated enforcement. Now, as Renee Cummings said, this area, a field that we're talking about in regards to surveillance technology, facial recognition technology, like voice recognition, and record recognition, all these different ways they can recognize us, right? There's even closed recognition that technology can do that now. There's all kinds of stuff, okay? So what's happening is that because it's all new, there's a lot of new terminologies and terms and uses of words to refer to it. So some people say surveillance tech, some people might say like precision policing, etc. There's also another term that's becoming very popular now, which is an all-encompassing term. All of that technology and technological services like block and all of that fall under this umbrella called automated enforcement. Okay, so essentially what it's saying is that law enforcement is the use of technology that utilizes sensors, if they be visual sensors like license plate readers, or audio sensors like gunshot detection technology like ShotSpotter, right? They're using sensors as a way to gain information to then enforce the law, or even to enable the enforcement of law, like looking at trends and crime analysis statistics through predictive policing technologies. These are all uses of technology to then enforce the law on the books. So it's all falling under this umbrella now of automated enforcement because this is all new, okay? We have not been doing this for a very long time. Body-worn cameras, even the dash cams, all of that falls under it. And as you can see here, what I did is I put together a little bit of a collage for you of what some of these technologies look like that you're already using here in Kalamazoo, which if you were here yesterday, Chief Boyson from KDPS did a phenomenal job at presenting all of the different technologies that KDPS is using right now that falls under this umbrella of automated enforcement, okay? So for instance, over here on the top, was it like this top corner right here that I'm pointing up at, that's a license plate reader. So some people say they see like cam trailers, where they just have a trailer with two wheels. And then you see this thing sticking up, that's a license plate reader. It's one that can be moved and then stationed at certain locations so that any car passing by, it can take the license plate, send that information over to whoever is collecting it. In this case, usually it's the police department. Now, below that, you see here is a red light camera. I'm sure some of you've seen these, just driving on the street, right? Okay, that's a camera. That's receiving information. That data is going someplace, right? Owned by a public, government entity, or if they have a contract with a third party, private entity, right? We also have here, right next to it, that's a speed light camera. And I know you all know about that one. Come on now, everybody knows about speed light cameras. So that's a picture of a speed light camera, once again, collecting data, right, through a visual sensor. And that information is going to a source, usually a public entity, who's using that to make some determinations. Are you violating the law, et cetera, et cetera? Are we going to give you a ticket, send it to you in the mail, enforce it, et cetera, right? Okay, above that, what do you see? And I know Chief Boyson did a great job at showing the video footage of the unmanned drone, one of the unmanned drones that are currently used by KDPS, and showing it in use on actually helping. So you see, this is an example of an unmanned drone. That's a still image of it, so you can actually see the full width of it. They have ones that are so small now, they can fit into your palm. Like literally law enforcement, they put it in the trunk of the car when they do like a traffic stop. They could just pop out the drone, have the drone engage you, because there's a speaker on it. So they could stay in their car, be on their cell phone, and talk to you, the driver, through a miniature drone that's flying right next to your window. And that way they themselves are safe the whole time, but still engaging you. They have cameras on it so they can see thermal imaging and all that, what's going on in your vehicle. And so now we're going to talk a bit about legal considerations, but these are the kind of technologies that are currently being used. I believe it's Oklahoma City Police are currently using the small handheld drones right now. So this is already happening. That's why it's important that we talk about solutions. Now, on the right next to that, you can see that's a license plate reader on the hood of a police car. I'm sure you've seen those. I mean, I've been driving around Kalamazoo this past week, and I've seen a bunch of Kalamazoo police SUVs with those license plate readers on them. So I know that you have that out here. And then below that, this is a New York Police Department crime. I know you recognize that every day. NYPD. And so you also see they have license plate readers on the trunk of the car. So they usually have them on both the hood and the trunk, so that way as they're driving by, any cars that are passing by them, the license plate readers are just automatically reading all the information off those license plates, both the front and the back. So that way there's no way that they miss you. So, these are the mobile, they call them mobile license plate readers, right? Because they're moving, rather than the stationary one like you saw with the camp trailer. And then they also have ones that are right next to like speed light cameras and red light cameras as well for traffic. And then this one in the middle here, that's just a regular camera. And the reason why I put that there is because I know that you have Kalamazoo has a contract with Flock. And I know this was discussed a bit yesterday. Flock is one of these companies that provides all kinds of services in regards to license plate readers, cameras for surveillance. They don't only provide it for law enforcement to have a network of cameras around the city, including their license plate readers on their cars that are all feeding information to law enforcement, but they also have it for housing associations. So I believe at least one of the housing associations in Kalamazoo has a contract with Flock, and so they currently have cameras. That information coming through those cameras is being fed to the company, Flock. They own that data. And so, that's why I put these pictures, this collage here specifically for you, so that you can get a still image view of the technologies that your police department is using right now. Now, there's other stuff too. There's one other piece I want to mention that Chief Boyson went into detail on yesterday, and it's called Fusus, F-U-S-U-S. Now, this is a box, and he did a great job of describing it. It's essentially a box that you can connect it, like wherever you put the box, like locate it and connect it to, all of the data streams. So in other words, if let's say the box is placed someplace where you have both red light camera, speed light camera, plus you have a license plate reader, okay? So you have 3 different streams of data. You have 3 different streams of information coming in, right? License plate reader, red light camera, speed light camera. Essentially what Fusus is gonna do is say, okay, police, instead of you needing 3 separate screens to look at each pathway of data, we're gonna take all of those pathways and consolidate them into one pathway. So now you're getting all that information on one screen, all of it sorted out, so that all you need to do is look at it. You don't have to go to this page and that screen and try to say, okay, for this time at 10 a.m., what was going on with this license plate reader, what was going on with this red light camera, what was going on with this speed light camera. Are we getting the same image? It's like, no, you can just literally come right on the screen for you. You don't have to do any of that hard work. To me, that's dangerous when law enforcement are able to get that kind of data on any of us whenever they want. And we don't have the laws and the rules and regulations on the books. If all you have is a policy, and I'm gonna say this, I'm gonna be like Phil was yesterday when he responded to the facial recognition technology from MSP. I'm gonna let you guys know that I have a big issue with what was discussed yesterday because there was a lot of emphasis on policy and no emphasis on law, okay? That's important to understand that because with the policy, especially with police departments, policy is determined by whoever's in charge of the police department. If it's a sheriff's office, the sheriff determines the policy for the whole office. If it's a police chief, the police chief determines the policy for the whole police department, like KDPS. So right now, you have a phenomenal police chief, Boyson, who's all in on, I'm not gonna support shots fired. I support having, civil rights respected, privacy rights respected. Our policy that I made sure got on the books reflects that. You have a wonderful sheriff as well, who we saw earlier, who also said that yesterday. So that's beautiful, but guess what? They're not gonna be in those positions forever, okay? They're not. And once they leave, guaranteed they will be a successor who will replace them. And whoever that person is might have a different vision for how technology and policing work together, okay? A lot more police are buying into utilizing technology because, and I'm gonna talk about that right now in a minute, because of a lot of different factors, but this is my concern, is that they decide, you know what, we're gonna have a different policy. We are gonna allow for the use of all this stuff. We're not gonna be as transparent to the public. We don't think that's gonna be helpful, et cetera, et cetera. And then everything that you're relying on, you're back to square one. You don't have any access to the knowledge, you don't have any access to the data, you have no way to hold them accountable if it's being misused, nothing. So to me, this is why it's important to get a law on the books, because when you get a law on the books, it does not matter who's in charge. It does not matter who's fired, who resigns, who leaves for whatever reason, the law stands. And in order to change that law, there's a whole bunch of democratic processes that have to happen first that involve the public and involve public input and feedback. That's what we call the democratic process, democracy. That's why we have it. But the thing is, because this is so new, we have not figured out the proper democratic processes for how this stuff should be purchased, governing how this stuff should be purchased, and how it should be used. So what I'm going to talk about with you today is the work I've done in Grand Rapids, Michigan over the past 4 years to help them get along, and Cole knows about this, along the books in 2022. We got some changes to a law that was already there, but that was very weak, and we made it stronger so that now we have solid civilian oversight, we have solid transparency, and we have accountability measures baked into the law that have already been implemented now 2 years later. What I call a success, because that's what you want. You want to get it passed, you want to get it implemented. That's a success. So we're going to talk about that today. But what I want to say to you about this, and I want to kind of talk to you about what's going on with law enforcement and why they are believing that they need to rely more on technology rather than on community members who they're meant to serve and whose tax-paying dollars are paying 100% for their salaries and pensions. Okay, so I'm going to talk about that right now. So automated enforcement mechanisms like surveillance technologies and services, facial recognition, and other biometric recognition technologies, predictive policing technologies and services, and the application of artificial intelligence, AI, to all of these technologies and services, including body-worn cameras from law enforcement, are becoming the favorite solutions to prevent negative police interactions, given the public's attention on and criticism of law enforcement misconduct, including biased and race-based policing. Also, the shortage in law enforcement staffing nationwide, the public's perception of increased crime across the country, the windfall of money and resources from federal government and private resources, like police foundations, to state and local law enforcement, and calls to prohibit or even restrict law enforcement traffic stops and to replace armed law enforcement with unarmed civilians for traffic stops. So as a result of this situation and the ongoing challenge faced by law enforcement agencies across the country to hire and retain officers, law enforcement is turning to technology as a color-blind alternative to help solve crime. A lot of law enforcement believe that technology could identify and enforce laws without any association to race, gender, or ethnicity. They also believe that if programmed correctly in regard to behaviors, robotic forms of policing, whether they be unmanned drones, fixed cameras, or robots, should be implemented and accepted. The collateral benefits to police that are being advertised by not only by police but also by vendors like Flock, who are trying to make money off of these services and technologies, are improved police officer safety and reduced incidents of use of force. So yesterday, I'm not going to go too much into this because yesterday we had two amazing speakers who went in depth on the legal considerations, specifically with the Fourth and Fifth Amendments. What I'm going to do is just touch on something that's important for you to know for today's conversation. So number one, when we're talking about what are the legal considerations, I'm only going to talk about the Fourth Amendment. So that's the amendment that has to do with search and seizure. So in other words, everybody who's a citizen of the United States of America has a right to liberty, meaning that law enforcement just can't stop you from living your life and walking and doing what you're doing. If they detain you, they question you, they arrest you, they do anything to stop your liberty, they have to have a reason for doing it, all right? There's different legal standards that the law has determined for what that is supposed to be. So the easiest way to describe it, because everybody knows stop and frisk, right? From New York City. So that's the best way I'm going to describe that. So there was a U.S. Supreme Court case called Terry v. Ohio, all right, that established a standard for when law enforcement is supposed to stop, especially pedestrians. So that standard, as you can see here, is reasonable suspicion, meaning that in order for an officer to stop you, they just can't stop you because you're walking in a high crime area. Oh, he's walking in a high crime area, he looks suspicious, okay, we're going to stop him. They can't do that. That's what New York City police were doing. Okay, they were stopping young Black and Latino youth on a regular basis in predominantly Black and Latino communities for no reason. And then what they were doing after that, so okay, you're supposed to have reasonable suspicion. What that means is that, let's say a confidential informant told an officer that this individual is going to be walking down this street at this time, and the officers know that's also a high crime activity area. They go to that location at that particular time, they see the individual that was described to them by the confidential informant, then now they have enough evidence to say we have reasonable suspicion to believe that this person is doing something that they're not supposed to do, or about to do something they're not supposed to do, or maybe they did something they're not supposed to do, right? So now they have a reason to stop and question, detain. If it goes to court, it's not going to get kicked out because the officers did something they were not supposed to do. So once they stop you, now in order for them to pat you down or frisk you, right, which is now them becoming more intrusive, more invasive, they're touching your body, that's a different legal standard. It's a much higher standard than reasonable suspicion. For that legal standard, it's called probable cause, which was talked about yesterday. I'm going to describe it in the most basic form. So we all have five senses, right? Okay, you can see, hear, you can smell, you can taste, and you can feel, okay? So the way that probable cause works is that if an officer is able to use any of their five senses to be able to determine that you're either committing a crime, you're about to commit a crime, or you committed a crime, then that is probable cause. So for instance, you get pulled over with the car before marijuana was legal. They come over the car, officers, they like to do the, like they come over the car and be like, hello, how you doing? License registration. Why are they doing that? They're doing that because they're smelling for marijuana. Okay, they're looking for a reason to say, step out of the vehicle and want to search. Okay, if they can smell it, that's your sense of smell, that gives them probable cause to now search the vehicle and search you. When we're talking about on the street, let's say an officer, they were told this person's going to be here, They're like, okay, we stop them, we question them. While they're questioning you, they notice a bulge sticking out of your pocket, and it looks like the figure of a gun. That is, they're using their eyes, they see it, that's probable cause. You might be in the process of committing a crime, you are told by a confidential informant that something was going to happen, you fit the description, etc. So they have to fulfill all of those standards in order for them to legally and constitutionally stop you and frisk you. NYPD was not doing that. They were just stopping people just because they were black or brown, and frisking them just because they were black and brown. That's why NYPD stop and frisk was found unconstitutional and is not supposed to be practiced anymore. I'm not going to say it's not. We got a lot going on in New York City right now, so I'm going to stay out of that. But I just want to make sure you understand the basic concept of it, because Now that you understand that, I want you to understand, think about how would this relate to technology when we talk about facial recognition? When we talk about like surveillance tech, some of the stuff I showed you earlier, like license plate readers, red light cameras, like, how does that stuff tie into that, right? You know, this is not somebody stopping you and saying, excuse me, I want to talk to you real quick. Here, I'm gonna put some handcuffs on you. That's not what this is, okay? This is a whole other ball of wax. But because it still ties into your expectation of privacy, right? As a citizen, under the Constitution, that means that anything tying into violations related to surveillance technology, facial recognition, voice recognition, all that stuff is gonna fall under the Fourth Amendment, all right? That's what lawyers, judges, lawmakers, that's what they're gonna look to when they're trying to figure out how do we put some restraints on this, how do we put some safeguards in place to respect people's constitutional rights. However, the problem here is that the Fourth Amendment, and this is what Bill said yesterday, and others have said, and it's true, the Constitution in general, the way that it's currently drafted, the way that it's currently operated, does not operate in a way to govern the purchase and the use of these technologies. It's just not there. And to be honest with you, as fast as these technologies are developing, it is not going to be able to catch up to it. Okay, that's just a fact. So because of that, that is why, like I said earlier, we need something more than a policy, okay? We need something on the books that is gonna be there sustainably over time, that has the democratic processes baked into it, all right? We don't need to say, oh, well, let's just wait for it to go to litigation, and we have the Fourth Amendment that we can rely on to win the case. No, we don't. By the time these technologies have evolved in the next year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, the Fourth Amendment won't even be applicable, to be honest. I mean, it'll be on a whole other level. So it's just important that you understand that right now, the way it stands is that we're relying on the Constitution when the Constitution is not even prepared to deal with this kinds of stuff. So this is why, and one other thing I want to mention as well is that even though there are not protections for privacy and civil rights across the board related to this, what it does do, it does provide, Chief Boyson talked about this yesterday, it does provide law enforcement with more evidence to be able to say, okay, now we have enough evidence to issue an arrest warrant. Now we have enough evidence to go into somebody's house with a warrant, right? It's giving them more information to be able to build a case against people, but at the same time not providing citizens, taxpayers, with the rights, the civil rights, and privacy rights under the Constitution. So you see there's a power disparity that's happening already, okay? There's a power disparity, it's not democracy. So what I'm gonna talk about real quick with you is what are the solutions, okay? So I just talked about the problem, laid out what's going on, but how can we change that? So like I said earlier, I work with communities around the country on advancing the community empowerment-centered approach. And the vehicle for the community empowerment-centered approach is the CAP method. And as you can see here on this slide, the CAP method consists of 3 components. Each component must be achieved in order for the CAP method to be successful. So the first component is community empowerment, and this entails community members, especially those who are living in neighborhoods, blocks, and zip codes in communities where you have both high levels of crime, like community violence, reckless driving, etc., and you also have a history of negative police interactions, like racial profiling, excessive use of force, sexual misconduct, etc. So these are community members who have to deal with both criminals and a history of law enforcement acting like criminals. How do they stay safe? How do their kids stay safe? How do their parents stay safe, okay? That's what I'm talking about. And in my opinion, the way to do that is to make sure we're creating processes and mechanisms that are allowing those specific directly impacted people to be involved in, number 1. Number 2, to have knowledge of, and number 3, and most importantly, to have meaningful decision-making authority over all direct police-civilian interactions, like stops, arrests, uses of force, searches, surveillance technology, the way protests are handled, even when it comes to developing and deploying strategies on anti-drug trafficking, anti-gun trafficking, anti-human trafficking. The whole point is that the people closest to the problems are also the people closest to the solutions. So if we want long-term solutions for long-term problems, then we have to make sure that those directly impacted individuals especially are at the helm of decision-making with law enforcement, working together with other public safety stakeholders like yourselves as one community to support public safety and ensure police accountability through more so proactive rather than reactive strategies. So, with that said, I'm going to talk about how we got that done in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So in 2020, NAACP Greater Grand Rapids branch, they reached out to me, like I already told you a little bit about my background. I used to direct NAACP National's Criminal Justice Reform Program. So they knew them from that work I had done years ago. So they got in touch with me and said, hey, our police chief is trying to purchase ShotSpotter and unmanned drones to create a drone first responder program, the first of its kind in the Midwest, similar to what they've done in California. So a drone first responder program, what that is essentially the license plate readers would be, the unmanned drone would be up in the air and would be the eyes, the virtual eyes for law enforcement, and the gunshot detection technology, ShotSpotter, would be the ears for law enforcement. So anytime a 911 call would be made, the unmanned drone would be the first on the scene. It would not be a human body. And the whole point of that is to allow for the robot on the scene to kind of do some reconnaissance, and law enforcement are back at the headquarters or in their car, on their cell phone, watching the video footage to see, okay, do we even need to show up? Maybe somebody else should, or maybe there's no issue, or if we do show up, should we show up and be prepared to use lethal force, etc. So it allows them to be more prepared, and it also prevents them from being injured, because now they know what they're walking into. So it's been going on for, I think, since 2018 in Chula Vista. Myself and NAACP Grand Rapids, we visited Chula Vista, California. We went on a full day tour of the Chula Vista Police Department. Got to check out met the pilots who teleoperate the unmanned drone. We got to check out the drone on the rooftop. It was very cool. But they only have they don't have ShotSpotter in California or in Chula Vista. They were like, we don't want it, we don't need it. And Grand Rapids, they were trying to do both. So the issue was that the Black and brown community in Grand Rapids, specifically in the 3rd Ward, they were already dealing with being over-surveyed by Grand Rapids Police Department. And the Grand Rapids Police Department was using helicopters from the Kent County Sheriff's Office that they were borrowing to do surveillance specifically of individuals in the 3rd Ward on a regular basis. So the people in the community knew that once they got these technologies, it was only going to get worse, right? Because now we don't even need a helicopter. We got the technology's doing it without a human being, right? So they knew it was going to get worse. So they brought me in to help them make changes to a law, the one you see here. So this is their administrative policy. It has the same effect as a local ordinance. And essentially, it governs the purchase and use of all surveillance technologies and services by all city government entities, including body-worn cameras of police officers. And so that's important to understand that this does not only cover law enforcement. It's a law, number one, like we said, the importance of law over policy. Policy is important, but you need a law, okay? The other thing is that it applies to all city government entities that are using these technologies and services. Why is that important? Because what we found, at least the work I've done, is that a lot of law enforcement around the country, if they themselves are not able to afford, or for whatever reason are restricted from gaining access to technology and services or the data from it, they will go to another city government agency like the fire department. A lot of them have drones too, you know. And they'll ask them, hey, listen, we got an incident on corner and corner. Can you fly up your drone and get some, data for us, and can you share it with us? Oh yeah, of course. Boom. It's as simple as that. So you can tell the police, you're not allowed to buy drones. You're not allowed to use this. And they're like, okay, we won't. But we'll just hit up the fire department. We'll hit up Parks and Recs. We'll hit up the sanitation, because all of them got the technology. All of them got cameras. All of them got cameras. The Department of Transportation, I just showed you the red light, speed light cameras. They all got cameras, okay? They're all collecting data on us constantly and using our taxpayer dollars to do it and not providing the data, okay? That's a problem in a democracy, okay? I'm just raising a red flag for y'all. That's a problem in a democracy. When the government has information on you that you're paying for and you do not have access to it, okay? That's not good. So what we did is ACLU had gotten this law passed in 2015, and it was very, very weak and diluted. The original bill that they had introduced was a lot stronger, but the city manager weakened it. So then we came in, I had co-authored NAACP's Born Suspect Indian Racial Profiling Report, published in 2014, provides all kinds of information on how to end racial profiling by state and local police, upstate and local police. So we provided some language that was from there, some legislative language in that report around data collection, analysis, public reporting, which I'm gonna show you in a minute, Something else we did was we made sure to include some information from other civilian oversight authorities in California, like Oakland, California, San Diego, California, San Francisco at the time, who were some of the strongest on this language for municipal laws in the country. And we created a red line document. In other words, red line where we felt the amendments needed, the changes needed to be made in the law. And then we went to the city manager, the police chief, the director of civilian oversight that they call the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability. And we also went to the city attorney, met with them, and said, this is what we want to see. We don't want shots fired. We think the money can be reinvested into social services, into affordable housing, etc. And we're not saying that technology is bad. We're not saying that police should not use technology. What we're saying is that if you're going to use it, you need the proper laws on the books to regulate it. And so it took about a year and a half of negotiating back and forth. Ultimately, it was ratified in 2022 into law by the Common Council. And the majority of the recommendations that we proposed were now ratified. So now, this is law, and what I want to talk about with you is what exactly is in it, okay? So for instance, it's very important to have a solid definition on surveillance. So the definition that we included in the law is equipment that was compromised on, was equipment capable of capturing and recording data, including images, video, photographs, or audio operated by or at the direction of city department or city employee, which may deliberately or inadvertently capture activities of individuals on public or private property, and drones or unmanned aircraft and any attached equipment used to collect. So that already is telling you this is how we define surveillance, okay? Now something else that's important is, what is it not, okay? And this is important, especially when you're engaging with city government, because they have so many different things that they're doing. They can't just do a blanket, okay, we're gonna have this be that and that's it. They have to consider certain nuances from their other city government entities. So for instance, what we had agreed is that any camera, any surveillance technology that is on city property, like let's say a city government building like City Hall, they have cameras surrounding it, they have cameras inside of it. Those do not fall under adherence of this law. In other words, they do not fall under the definition of surveillance. So that means they do not have to comply with this law, okay? Something else, and what I highlighted here is that date. Surveillance equipment acquired before March 24th of 2015, that is the date that the original law was ratified, the one that ACLU worked on that was weakened. So they said that anything that was purchased, service, or technology before that date does not have to adhere to this law, is essentially grandfathered in. So anything that's of that date and after, that's been purchased, has to adhere to this law. So that's just important to know. They did create a deadline or a cutoff point. Now the same thing for surveillance services. So services provided to a city department by a third party. I want to highlight third party for you because Flock, you guys have a contract with Flock. They're considered a third party. They're a private party. They're a third party to the citizenry and to the government. So whether public or private, that results in acquisition of data, etc. You can read the rest there. But and then once again, that date of March 24th, 2015 is the cutoff. Anything that's been purchased prior to that service-wise will not have to adhere to the law. Anything that date or after does have to. Okay, now in regards to transparency, now this is similar to what Chief Boyson said. It's just that, like I said, with Chief Boyson, we're talking about policy. With this, we're talking about law. Okay, so that's the big difference, but that's the difference. So Chief Boyson said that I think KDPS already has a transparency webpage that, and he referenced it a lot, which I love that, where pretty much anything and everything going on with public safety in Kalamazoo, you go to that page and you can find it, okay? So Grand Rapids, the city of Grand Rapids also has their own transparency webpage. And so on that page, the city shall maintain a website accessible to the public, a full listing of all approvals issued by the city commission for acquisition or use of surveillance equipment or surveillance services, along with operational data management protocols that have been approved for such surveillance equipment or services. So in other words, anytime a law enforcement agency or any other city government entity wants to purchase any kind of surveillance tech that falls under the definition of surveillance, then they have to provide information on like, will there be any kind of potential disparate impact for the use of it? What's the mitigation plan to mitigate the potential disparate impact? How does it operate? Etc. All that information needs to be made public. Needs to be made public prior to any decision being made on purchasing the technology. So that way members of the public have an opportunity to see it, provide their own public comment, and then the decision will be made on the purchase of the technology. Something else that I want to highlight here is that body-worn cameras also fall under the definition of surveillance technologies. However, they only apply whenever the body-worn camera or dash cam, in-car camera, has been deactivated, okay? If it's on purpose by an officer or if it's by accident. Anytime that happens, then it falls under compliance of this law because now the Civilian Oversight Authority, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, now they would have to get involved and investigate what happened with the camera failure, okay? So why is this important for West Michigan? Because anybody who's aware of the Patrick Leoya case that happened back in 2022, you know that that case involved the officer who killed him had deactivated his body-worn camera during the scuffle. Initially, he said that he didn't deactivate it, that Patrick had deactivated it during the scuffle, but that's impossible because the police chief said they specifically got those body-worn cameras so that it would take a certain level of pressure from a human, muscle in order for like a certain level of pounds in order for that button to come on. And some scuffle, the way it was, there's no way that Patrick would have hit the button and it would have been deactivated. Somebody would have had to have intentionally held it for a certain amount of time in order for it to turn off. You're not going to do that in this scuffle. So he lied, which is why he got fired. That's one reason why he got fired. But, the whole point is that the Patrick Leoya case is also a part of this law because the Patrick Leoya case happened after March 24th of 2013. Okay, so we're going to talk about how it is a part of the law. But just know body-worn cameras and in-car cameras are also fall under the definition of surveillance only when they're deactivated. Now, something else it does, so in Grand Rapids, Michigan, just like here in Kalamazoo, they have a Civilian Oversight Authority. In Grand Rapids, it's called the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability. Now, under this changes to this law, we've now created an additional Civilian Oversight Authority called the Community Advisory Committee on Surveillance. And this committee it's essentially the existing Public Safety Committee that already exists in Grand Rapids. So that Public Safety Committee, it consists of both Common Council elected officials and civilians who are on that committee, and they already work on public safety issues related to Grand Rapids. So now, in addition to those responsibilities, they're also going to be tasked with being the Community Advisory Committee on Surveillance, all right? And what they're going to do is help guide decisions about if and how surveillance technologies and services should be used by the city and its municipal agencies. And there's also a standard of approval that was amended in the changes to the law. So the current standard of approval says that the City Commission shall only approve a request to fund, acquire, or use a surveillance technology if it determines the benefits of the surveillance technology outweigh its costs, that the proposal will safeguard civil liberties and civil rights, and that the uses of the deployments of the surveillance technology will not be based upon discriminatory or viewpoint-based factors, or have disparate impact on any community or group. Now, in my opinion, that's a really good standard of approval. I mean, I'm just saying word-wise. How it plays out in implementation, that's a whole other ball of wax, but you have to start with something. And you want to have a solid foundation that reflects the values of your community, okay? So that's why I want to really emphasize on you the fact that this law was not drafted by the government, okay? This was a law that was drafted with myself, NAACP, and other people in the community working on it, and then providing it to the government, and then having a back and forth and compromising on the language. In other words, we utilized a democratic process to get this law together, okay? This is what it's about. This is how the sausage is made in this country. Nobody's gonna get everything they want, right? But you're gonna get something, but you gotta work for it. You gotta talk to each other. You don't stay in your corners and get what you want. You gotta talk to each other and work it out. So I wanna just emphasize on you the process that we used, not only what was produced, but the fact that we did it together. We didn't do it silently. One other thing to also emphasize here is that the public comment period, and so the public city commission hearings at which the public is afforded fair and adequate opportunity for at least a month. So pretty much anytime there are any hearings from the Community Advisory Committee on surveillance, those will be public hearings where after that hearing is over, there will be oral public comment at the hearing. Once it's over, there'll be 1 month long opportunity to provide a written comment. So if you were not able to show up to the public comment in person, If people got things going on in their lives, there still is opportunity to get your voice heard on the record, and most importantly, all public comments are available to everybody. So anybody in your community who said, this is what I feel about this, you are able to see that, okay? Sharing knowledge amongst each other. That's also a part of democracy. Okay, so now when we're talking about complaints, I know this is gonna be a popular slide right here. So complaints, audits, and surveillance use reports. In any quarter that surveillance equipment or surveillance services are used, departments utilizing surveillance equipment and or services shall prepare a quarterly, that's once every 3 months, surveillance use report. A copy of that report shall be provided to OPA, that's the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability, for review. So that means that each government agency, if it be Parks and Recs, sanitation, law enforcement, they all, if they're using that technology that falls under the definition of surveillance, they have to once every 3 months produce a report about what's been going on with its use, have there been any complaints filed, any violations, any red flags, etc. And all of that information goes directly to civilian oversight, and then they determine what they're going to do with that information. So as you can see in the second bullet here, or the second paragraph, individuals with complaints regarding misuse or overuse of surveillance equipment and or surveillance services may file complaints with OPA, Office of Oversight and Public Accountability. So anytime there's an issue, like somebody believes, okay, this person has misused or abused the authority. A clear example, because I know we all are using FLOC, and I know this was brought up yesterday with the Electronic Frontier Foundation presentation. So recently, I believe in Wichita, Kansas, a police officer in Wichita, Kansas, used FLOC to stalk his ex-girlfriend. Okay, now, I think this just came out in the news about a week or two ago, right? This is very recent. So it's just, we want to make sure, because that could always happen, all right? Police are human beings, just like all of us. People do things they're not supposed to do sometimes. I mean, it's just what it is. But that's why you have to put the safeguards in place, so that if it happens, boom, you got flagged on it, now your supervisor's involved, now we can figure out what to do, right? Not like what happened in Wichita, where he's accessing FLOC and using it however he wants. Supervisors don't know, the police chief doesn't know, the community doesn't know that their taxpayers are being used for this purpose, okay? That's a problem in a democracy, in my opinion. That's a problem. So it's so important that we make sure that there's a complaint process. It's good to have a policy, but we also need to have a law that provides for a complaint process so that community members, taxpayers, can actually say, okay, I don't like the way this is being used. This guy is stalking people with the technology. How is that helping me out with public safety? I'm filing a complaint, all right? There needs to be that process. Not every police department has that kind of process as it relates to their technology. They might have their general complaint process, but not one that's specific to violations as it relates to surveillance technology and services. Now, something else that's important here as it relates to complaints is that, and I like this is actually my favorite slide, actually. You're gonna see why in a minute. After consultation with the City Attorney's Office, the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability, Civilian Oversight Authority, will also publish the audit summary, redacted, on the city's website to review by the public. In other words, once the Civilian Oversight Authority has done their investigation of the complaint, they will then put the results of that investigation on the city's website. So anybody, anywhere you are in the world, can see it on the transparency page. And of course, any sensitive information will be redacted, okay? But when we talk about democracy, your taxpayer dollars, this is what it's supposed to look like, okay? This is my favorite part over here. OPA, the Civilian Oversight Authority, will also provide the Community Advisory Committee on Surveillance, the other Civilian Oversight Authority. They're working together. Oh no, they're working together. With copies of audit summaries and request action from the Community Advisory Committee on Surveillance if an investigation finds that action is taken in violation of this policy. What does that last bullet say? The Community Advisory Committee on Surveillance can discontinue use of the technologies and services if the audit shows that the use violated the policy, violated the law. Now you understand the power of civilians, okay? Not police, not the police chief saying, oh, I got a policy. They did something I don't think was right. I'm gonna discontinue the use, as opposed to the law. Okay, we the civilians, we're looking at this. Oh, okay, we don't like this. Stop it. This is our money, we don't like it, stop it. See the difference? The power disparity, right? That's why, like I said earlier, it's about community empowerment. How do we empower the full community, not just part of the community, right? Not just law enforcement. And we do it with this, with legislative language that ultimately results in action by having civilian oversight authorities with power working together, and training, which is the piece that's not included in here, and that's going to be the next thing, is the training. But yeah, we got to have them doing this stuff. Okay, something else that's important for you to know, and when it comes to community empowerment, transparency, and like what's going on with my taxpayer dollars, something else that's required under the changes to the law is that now, annually, there needs to be a report published by the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability, stating what the impact has been for that year for the use of all surveillance technologies and services. And for instance, that will, the information that will be provided for the previous calendar year will include information on any violations of civil liberties and civil rights, any complaints broken down by race, gender, age, location. Also, how much money did it cost to purchase and use the technology that year, and what were the sources of funding? That's a big issue, because a lot of people don't realize that law enforcement and other government agencies are actually going to private sources to get the money to purchase the equipment and services. They're not always using taxpayer dollars. But because they're a government entity, taxpayers just don't know about that, okay? So now, they have to know about it, because annually this report will be published and the information will be at your disposal. So the first report was published in April of this year. It was late, it was supposed to be published last December, but because it's the first one, a lot of things had to be worked out, so it came out April this year. And in my opinion, doesn't have a lot of meat on the bones, because it's the first one, but it at least provides a skeleton on this is how this gets done, this is the structure, this is how the sausage gets made, okay? Now, the Patrick Leotia case is mentioned in that report because of what I said earlier, the deactivation of the body-worn camera. So, because the Patrick Leotia case has not gone to trial yet, the investigation by the Civilian Oversight Authority cannot move forward until that trial moves forward. Once that happens, then that report will reflect the final determination from the Civilian Oversight Authority on that particular case. So be on the lookout for that report. I don't know if it'll be this one for this year, but it might be the one for next year, because I think the trial's going to happen next year for the Patrick Leotia case. But look out for that report, because they're going to talk about it in that report. Okay, prohibited uses. I'm almost done, just to let you know, I'm almost wrapping up. Prohibited uses. And so this is very important, because we talk about what is it we do not want the technology and services to be used for. So under the policy of the law in Grand Rapids, surveillance equipment and services shall not be used to harass, intimidate, or discriminate against any individual group. What does that sound like? Maybe Wichita? Using FLOC to harass and stalk people, right? Okay, you can't do that. Okay, we have a law that says you cannot do that. There will be consequences if you do that. Surveillance equipment and services shall not be utilized to conduct personal business of any type. What does that sound like? But okay, you want to make sure that your values are reflected in the legislative language, right? If you don't want a situation like Wichita with FLOC, well then make sure that the language reflects that, right? And except as approved by the city manager or their designee in extenuating circumstances, which is a term that's kind of broad, but essentially it's when a government agency believes that there's a good belief, a reasonable good belief that we're going to have to use the technology or purchase it. We have to purchase new technology without having to adhere to this law. That's all that is. But the whole point is that these technologies cannot be weaponized unless there's like some kind of really extenuating circumstance. Like there has to be something really extreme in order for them to justify weaponizing any kind of unmanned drone, which you know they're doing that now in some places with tasers and with guns and stuff and all kind of explosives. So that is not allowed in this law, okay? So I just want to make sure we understand policy. Boyson retires, boop, policy's gone, all right? You get a new person in, they're like, I got a new policy. Law, Boyson retires, boop, law still in place, even with the new people coming in, okay? I just want to make sure you understand that difference, because I know yesterday we talked a lot about policy and not a lot about law. And then last thing here is that since the changes were made in 2022 to the Grand Rapids policy on the purchase and use of surveillance technology, we have provided an additional red line document. And this time, this is a red line document that prohibits the use of all facial recognition technologies other biometric remote recognition technologies, and predictive policing technologies by all law enforcement in Grand Rapids, period. And the reason why we're saying it should be prohibited is because thus far, the information that we have on it, the science, the studies, the research, has shown that this information, that these technologies and services have a high disparate impact, okay? They are high adverse disproportionate impact, especially on people of color, especially on Black women, okay? So we want to make sure that if we're going to be using things with our taxpayer dollars, that we can be confident that it's not going to violate people's constitutional rights. And that if there is a likelihood that it could do that, we have the proper safeguards in place to make sure that if it does happen, then we can repair the harm quickly and hopefully prevent the harm from happening in the first place. But I mean, I'm just being realistic. Things happen, you know, things happen, especially in the legal system. Mistakes happen, things happen. So we just got to make sure if it does happen, we're able to quickly repair that and get people back to where they need to be. And in my opinion, the way that we're using this stuff now, we're not even thinking on that level. We're just like, oh wow, you can do that? That's really cool. I mean, that's where we're at with the technologies right now. It's like, oh, that's cool. You know, let's buy it, you know? That's not a smart way to use this when we're talking about infringing upon people's constitutional rights. And privacy rights, civil rights, all of that. So, I put together some questions here for you, or if you want, you can just ask me questions, and I can respond. So for instance, I put together some stuff just to have y'all kind of think about, if you wanted a law for Kalamazoo County, what would you want included language-wise in that law? For instance, what potential uses of surveillance technology, facial recognition, other biometric recognition, predictive policing technologies and services should be expressly prohibited? In other words, what is it you think we do not need this kind of technology in Kalamazoo? Or we can just do Q&A where you ask me stuff and I just answer it.
Okay, I have a question. I think it's like one slide back.
Okay.
It says prohibited uses of automated enforcement.
Yes.
One more back.
Oh, one more? Yes.
Yeah, that's the one. I would have thought that you didn't need a new law or ordinance to make harassing, intimidating, or discriminating against people illegal, even though you're using special automated equipment. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I would have thought that would be covered by like regular law.
So I think it goes back to what I said earlier. You want to make sure that the values that you and your community have are reflected in the language. And so I don't think it's about necessarily saying specifically you're not supposed to harass. I think it's just about making the point that we don't want these technologies to be used like this because we know that there's a high likelihood that they could be, considering what happened in Wichita, right? And so just making sure to make that clear that nobody's supposed to use it for anything that even appears to be, you know, intimidation or harassment. Just because in my opinion, law enforcement in general, they have a lot of power in this country. Okay, we all know that, the union contracts, the US Supreme Court decisions, all that stuff. And we've seen what happened in Wichita. It's very easy to get what I call a God complex, where everybody is treating you like you're the one, like seriously, like whatever you say, I'm listening, you know. You got the power, I don't. It's very easy to do like that officer did in Wichita. To feel like, well, I'm just gonna go in the system and look up and see what she's doing. Oh, is that where she at? Oh, okay. I said, oh, okay, over there too. I got you. It's very easy to feel that you can easily just do that, and it's okay to do that, rather than thinking, like you could think it in your mind, like, man, I wish I could use that system and look her up, but if I do, I'm gonna lose my job, because, you know, yeah, our chief don't play like that, our sheriff don't play like that. Obviously, that didn't happen in Wichita. It's not only Wichita, there have been other places where similar services and technologies have been used by supervisors, rank and file officers, police chiefs at times, sheriffs, in unethical and unconstitutional ways, right? And to be honest, most of the time that they're doing it, we're probably not gonna know about it, right? I mean, they're not gonna get caught. It's just that the one who was not smart enough to cover up his tracks, like the one in Wichita, he got caught doing it. But trust me, a lot of them are doing this stuff because there's nobody there telling them not to. There's no principles, you know, that are established on this use of these technologies that say, these are our principles. This is how, like, what we believe in for operating these technologies. Just like, hey, look, this is a new thing we got. We can do all these fun things with it. Hey guys, what do you think? Like, that's the conversation with law enforcement on this stuff right now. They're not talking about violating anybody's rights. They're just talking about, it's cool. I can use it to do that. Well, that'll make my job a lot easier, you know? So,
So this is really less of a question, more thinking about the question you just asked. When I see that surveillance equipment and services shall not be used, et cetera, like put into law, it makes me think about what the officers were saying yesterday, where there are checks and logs that require, like, every person who uses this stuff has to be logged. And I think the idea that, of course, being able to harass a citizen is not legal. Having something like this means you also take that step to think about, okay, well, what checks and balances are we going to put in place in advance to make sure that's not done, so that we don't have to retroactively kind of pursue. I feel like this is cutting out, pursue what happened. It's already set in a place that, okay, you can't even access the system unless you're authorized to do so for a predetermined, specified thing.
right, and I think that's very important to make it explicit for officers as well, right? Like, to hold them to account and not just think, okay, well, they know not to do that, right? I mean, I don't need to say anything, I don't need to post anything, because this is all new stuff. And at the end of the day, I think law enforcement sees it more as a toy, like a bunch of toys, rather than seeing it as like very high-level technology that is very still in its experimental phase, and we really don't know what the long-term impacts are for using it yet. So maybe we should either not use it, or if we do, very sparingly, right? That's not how they're thinking. They're thinking like, oh man, I'm gonna go all in on this. What? Like, I can do that, and I can do that. Oh, that's not helping. And then something else I want to highlight, that earlier, I think it was Renee Cummings, when she showed those slides from, I think one was from New Jersey, Patterson, New Jersey, the African-American gentleman who was misidentified with facial recognition technology. The other one was from the African-American woman and also the African-American gentleman from Detroit, who were also misidentified with facial recognition technology. What I want to say to you about both of those, real quick, about both of those cities, is that both Detroit was under federal oversight, under consent decree, while President Obama was president, and they were under consent decree until 2015, from when he was first president, okay? So that's not that long ago. That's only like maybe less than about 10 years ago. They have a pattern of practice of violating people's constitutional rights, especially black people in a black city. Also, Patterson, New Jersey, about last year, 2 years ago, they didn't come under federal oversight. They came under oversight from the state attorney general of New Jersey. And they ended up putting the whole police department under receivership. Like, you remember Britney Spears? You know how they were like, oh, her parents are not letting her do anything, they got her under conservatorship? That's what they did to the police department in Patterson, New Jersey, 2 years ago, okay? They don't have any autonomy, they don't have any control over their own police department. The state attorney general now has to dictate what they do, all right? And the reason being is because there was, once again, a pattern of practice of those officers at that police department violating black people, because once again, a black city, black people's constitutional rights. And so my point is this: we also got to think about the human element. We got to think about the fact that who is actually operating these technologies? Who is developing these codes for the algorithms, right? When the police show up, once the data gives them the information and they show up on the scene, how are they going to act? All of that stuff is based on the human element. And what we know thus far about the human element of most law enforcement, of culture of most law enforcement in this country, is that they're very biased. They are extremely biased. And so to give anybody who's that biased and has a history of it access to toys, to technologies and services that can have this kind of impact on people's lives, on taxpayers' lives, I just think it's very dangerous. I think that we need to have the laws in place to regulate it, so that way we have to do what law enforcement's not going to do for themselves. We have to make them not use the technology in a way that we don't want it used. We cannot rely on them to just do that. They're not responsible. They're just not. And like I said, you all have a wonderful sheriff, you have a wonderful police chief right now. In the next 5 years, I don't know what's going to happen. All right? So you just got to kind of think about that. You know, what you have right now is not always going to be the case, but you want to have a law that will keep it in place as long as possible.
I have a question as far as facial recognition of the black women. That was very troubling to see that. So is that Michigan, throughout the whole United States? I mean, is that?
You mean like the high likelihood of misidentification rate, like, right?
Correct.
Yeah, that's in general. Because of the way that the technology is set up. I know Renee could probably tell me, I'm not even gonna try it, because you can talk about that in detail a lot better than I can, but from what I know, the way that facial recognition currently, the way that it operates, it does not do well with recognizing darker complexion skin. And because of that, you see a lot of misidentifications. Now, I don't know why.
Because of the data, how it was collected and how the model was trained. So what the model did, the company that created this technology, really Clearview, they scraped the internet and they scraped a lot of data. But most of the data that was scraped, the images that were scraped from Facebook and Instagram, which is generally were of course more images of white men. So the technology works best with white men as opposed to black and brown individuals. So you would find if I go to the airport and they say, could we take a scan of your face as you present your documents to TSA, you would find that women in particular, and black and brown individuals, definitely more challenges. So just a little backstory. There's a data scientist by the name of Dr. Joy Bulamwini, and she was the one who brought the world's attention to the challenge of facial recognition. She was using the technology to do a project at MIT, and she was trying to capture her face with this image recognition technology. She realized she's a dark-skinned black woman and realized it was not happening. She went to the party store and she bought a white mask, and she put the white mask on her face, and for the first time the technology captured her face. So Joy Bulamwini, Timnit Jabru, and Deborah Raji, three women who I know very well, they decided to do an investigation into the data, and they revealed to the world that this technology is flawed when it comes to black, brown skinned women. There's a fantastic documentary on Netflix called Coded Bias, and you can look at Coded Bias and you can see all the challenges with this technology and more of Joy's work. And she has a great book called Unmasking AI that everyone should read. And she really is a powerhouse, young black woman, MIT PhD, who has realized that this technology is way too flawed to be used in the realm of law enforcement. She also has, you can find her online at the Algorithmic Justice League.
Thank you so much.